Each year, on December 7th, we in America stop to remember the 1941 surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, a beautiful naval base on the island of Oahu, Hawaii.
The carnage of that day was shocking. 19 ships and over 300 aircraft damaged or destroyed, and 2,403 American lives lost. It was the catalyst for U.S. involvement in World War II.
But what have you heard about what led to that attack? And what can we take away from that significant moment in history and apply to our life today? These are the questions we hope you'll give us several minutes to address.
At the end of World War I, the United States led their four allied partner nations, the United Kingdom, France, Italy, and Japan, in a treaty known as the Washington Naval Treaty to prevent an arms race. The U.S. maintained an isolationist posture at the time and wanted to get away from the cost and destruction of world wars. Over the next decade and a half, our country took that position seriously and even allowed our warships to fall well below the number of ships allowed in the treaty. This was a problem, though, as other countries, including Japan, were not following the U.S. lead. Instead, Japan would go through a period of rapid growth and expansion, becoming more industrialized, building up their military.
When the Great Depression hit in 1929, Japan was ill-prepared for an economic impact. A nation with few natural resources of its own, Japan depended on international trade. In order to buy the resources it needed, like oil, iron, and steel, Japan needed to export products. This became increasingly difficult in the early 1930s, as the major countries that exported those products had also raised tariff taxes on imported products. So with less of a profit for their exported products, in the US and elsewhere, Japan could not afford to import things it needed.
Military leaders in Japan took decisive action to invade China for resources like iron, soybeans, and land. By 1934, Japan rescinded their involvement in both the Washington Naval Treaty and the London Naval Treaty. They had begun to become an imperial superpower. While Japan continued to invade other countries, the American government passed restrictions on Japan through economic sanctions on aircraft, scrap metal, and other vital resources needed to expand Japan's military. Instead of stopping Japan's expansion, Japan went on to invade French Indochina and allied itself with Germany and Italy, two militaristic governments with their own goals of conquest and nationalism.
So, with wars looming on both the Atlantic and Pacific coasts, on June 17, 1940, Chairman of the House of Naval Affairs Committee, Georgia Congressman Carl Vinson brought forward the Two-Ocean Navy Act, a bill crafted by Chief of Naval Operations Harold R. Stark. It called for a 70% increase in the size of the U.S. Navy at a cost of $4 billion. Vinson made the argument that Americans could not enjoy the freedoms they had fought so hard for if the country lacked the ability to defend them. The vision for this bill was that the U.S. Navy could take offensive action against the enemy in one ocean while carrying out a successful defensive operation against an opposing navy in another ocean. It was signed into law on July 19, 1940, and substantially helped the U.S. Navy and the country begin to prepare for World War II.
In July of 1941, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt announced a trade embargo on oil. The oil shortage destroyed Japan's economy and put their military expansion at a standstill. The attack at Pearl Harbor was the idea of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Japanese Combined Fleet. Yamamoto argued that the attack would deal a fatal blow to the enemy fleet, since Pearl Harbor gave the American fleet a tactical advantage in a Pacific conflict. The attack started at 0700 on December 7, 1941, when two Army privates noticed an irregularity on the sonar, but were told that they were seeing American B-17s. Then, at 0758, a radio alert was sent out. Air raid at Pearl Harbor. This is not a drill. The Japanese planes attacked in two waves. A total of 353 planes reached Oahu. While dive bombers attacked U.S. air bases across Oahu, the Japanese torpedo bombers led the attack on the ships in Pearl Harbor. The Japanese focused their efforts on eliminating the U.S. battleships, which were the biggest threat to Japan's intentions of conquering Manchuria.
During the attack, Admiral Isaac C. Kidd and Captain Franklin van Valkenburg, commander of the USS Arizona, rushed to the bridge to direct her defense. Both were subsequently killed by an explosion in the forward magazine. The USS Arizona ultimately sank, taking 1,177 of her crew with her. The USS Oklahoma was sunk by several torpedoes during the attack, claiming another 429 lives. Under bombardment and hails of gunfire, the destroyer USS Helm was able to locate and sink a Japanese submarine at the entrance to the harbor.
Ensign Joe Taussig was able to get his ship, the USS Nevada, underway during the attack. Damaged by a torpedo, the USS Nevada was intentionally breached at the entrance of the harbor to deny passage to the Japanese. When the day was over, 19 ships and over 300 aircraft were damaged or destroyed, and more than 2,400 American lives were lost. The following day, the United States declared war on the Empire of Japan.
Though Yamamoto had hoped to destroy morale in the U.S. Navy, he had awakened the beast. The American people rallied behind the U.S. Navy, foregoing the purchase of new pots and pans to ensure the Navy had the steel it needed to build its ships as fast as possible. War bonds were bought, and the fireside chats led by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt over the radio, a new medium of communications at the time, would gain the support for the policies needed to enter and help win World War II.
As we pause our hectic lives to honor the fallen at Pearl Harbor, and as the number of survivors sadly dwindles down, some may wonder about the relevance of a battle like Pearl Harbor to today's Navy. Are there lessons from 1941 that still apply in 2020? What is the importance of studying and paying tribute to an event that occurred 79 years ago, or of passing on any of our history, heritage, and traditions? It is often said that those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. A glance at today's geopolitical landscape reveals similarities to the past. We again face aggressive challenges in Europe and the Pacific, as acknowledged by the Navy's strategic direction of great power competition. Admiral Mike Gilday, our Chief of Naval Operations, asks us to question our assumptions. Many assumed Japan could not and would not attack Pearl Harbor and risk awakening the sleeping giant.
Admiral Gilday's Mission 1 for today's Navy is operational readiness. In other words, the giant does not have the luxury of sleeping on the watch. Everything we do, maintenance, schedules, training, fiscal stewardship, down to the deck plate leader's daily concern for morale, feeds into operational readiness. As the Chief Petty Officer's Guide states, no failure is final unless the failure destroys morale.
Our Navy and our country could never have responded so emphatically without unshakable belief in the righteousness of our cause. In 2030, the Navy will commission its first aircraft carrier named for an African American, the Pearl Harbor hero, Doris Miller.
Dory Miller and the legacy of Pearl Harbor continue to speak to us today. We honor our heritage and heroes because it is right, but also because it motivates us to chase our best ever performance. We must forge ahead with urgency, ever mindful of the lessons of the past, fiercely proud to carry our heritage into the future. This is the challenge of leadership, and we will pursue it intently. December 7th, 1941. I remember.
I remember.
I remember.